in the wound on the body of the victims, but also crush the victim's soundness and degrading on his or her human dignity and identity. Directly and indirectly including the secondary victims, such as his or her families and society. Such deep impact have made the secondary victims find it difficult to get reconnected themselves with their society. It has made their daily living a challenge. Also, it has made the victims find it difficult and feel the pressure when having to interact with society. Many of them suffer post-traumatic stress disorder as a result. Some are constantly consumed by fear and anxiety, that making them lose trust in their immediate persons or become pessimistic. Enforced disappearance may have led to extensive impact on the victim's physical health and mental condition. Such ambiguity has made the victim be constantly engrossed in excessive imagination of the disappearance being haunted by the image of their loved ones that might subject to torture, inhuman or ill treatment, pains, and even the destruction and concealment of their bodies. The families of the victims, as a result, have to live with the traumas and disease and grossly inhuman and cruel memories that define their life perpetually. In Thailand, we have no specific law to criminalize enforced disappearance. It requires the bringing of the body of the disappeared as evidence to prove the guilt. Weakness among law enforcement agencies, including among Department of Special Investigation, has led the cases of enforced disappearance being intervened by influential people. It has encouraged feeble human rights protection mechanisms, ineffective witness protection programs, and many problems as to acquisition of the forensic evidence. All of these have made the proving of guilt of the perpetrators become a burden on the victim families and make their access to justice almost impossible. Insofar, even though successive governments in Thailand have provided some victims' families with monetary remedies, but the genuinely effective remedies have to be holistic, covering mental aspects, quality of life development, and particularly the disclosure of truth and the rendition of justice. The restoration of human dignity and the help needed for families of the victim to be reintegrated with society. The state has to accept the truth that by merely providing money as compensation, it does not have to restore dignity and erase the cruel memories that keep haunting with the victims. The unorganized death remedies provided at present have even started the transition of the victims and the society, and there is simply no guarantee that such remedies shall bear any sustainable fruit. The disclosure of truth about the disappearance and fate of the disappeared, as well as the crushing of culture of impunity, should be addressed at the beginning to bring justice to the victims and to set out standards and rules of reintegration. Social and cultural transformation is of importance as well. It is necessary to raise the social awareness that the state need to be tolerant to diverse opinion and to refrain from viewing other people as their enemies. The culture of use of violence to justify dissent, including among peaceful activists, had to stop. The state has to remain the rule of law. People have to practice nonviolence and nurture and ensure that the culture that respects human rights takes root in Thai society. On the 1000th day of the enforced disappearance of Sombath Somphone, and as a victim of enforced disappearance in Thailand, I urge the Thai government, Laos, and other Asian countries whose mandate is to bring justice to their people, to ramp up the effort to bring to light the truth and to bring to the victims and their families justice. The state shall not protect any perpetrators who could be state official or a person who acts under their supervision. It has to assure that enforced disappearance must be stopped, and necessary and effective measures are put in place to protect, prevent, and eliminate the act of enforced disappearance. In order to do that, enforced disappearance must be criminalized by specific law, and relatives of the victims must be allowed to take part openly in the legislative process. Thailand and all Asian countries should immediately ratify the UN Convention for the protection of all persons from enforced disappearance. Last but not least, until now, life after life has been disappeared as a result of the gross defiance and indifference of some state officials, and it has left deep scars in so many people. By confronting the truth and accepting the guilt as well as bringing justice to the victims, it could be the best form of remedies and the best stable and sustainable solution to address human rights violation. To stop impunity, to stop enforced disappearance, we have to break the wall of silence, and we have to break the wall of fear. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Kunankana, for sharing with us your experience from the perspective of victims of enforced disappearance and the challenges of obtaining justice, particularly in a country like Thailand that we've seen still had a massive number of cases of unsolved cases of enforced disappearances. Next, Debbie, who knows ASEAN inside out, has been campaigning particularly on Burma, Myanmar at the ASEAN level. And as you probably know, every year in connection with the ASEAN Summit, which is the meeting of the ASEAN, the head of government of ASEAN member states, there is an event organized by civil society called the ASEAN People's Forum, ASEAN Civil Society Conference. Next year, as you all know, Laos will take over the chair of ASEAN for 2016. So now the problem is, will there be an ASEAN People's Forum and an ASEAN Civil Society Conference in Laos, or will the disappearance of Sombath have an impact on this event as well? Debbie.
Thank you, Andrea. It's a very big honor to be on this very distinguished and inspiring panel. Besides denying the victims and families of the disappeared, especially of Sombath Somphone, access to justice, the Lao authorities seem intent on denying regional civil society too the right to discuss justice and social justice. Earlier this year, the ASEAN Civil Society Conference, ASEAN People's Forum 2015 in Kuala Lumpur, was told to remove any references in our statement to Sombath Somphone's disappearance, to dams, to the LGBT community, to indigenous peoples, and to multi-party democracy. We were told to do this in a letter purportedly signed by NGOs and civil society organizations from Laos who attended a meeting at the Lao Foreign Ministry in Vientiane. What is disturbing is that the traditional partners that we've had in Laos, that regional civil society have had in Laos, seem to have disappeared as well. It is very consistent with what Sri Meng said, that civil society groups who have been working on what we would consider very non-controversial issues have been chased away, have gone underground, have stopped engaging with regional partners, and have instead been replaced by so-called civil society groups that are strictly towing and promoting the government line. So, we are supposed to be gagged. We're not allowed to say the word Sombath, not just in Laos, but in ASEAN. This gag and the apparent cover-up of Sombath's disappearance implies the guilt of the Laos authorities. Instead of trying to intimidate civil society in Laos and in ASEAN, they should actually be using up all those resources to have a proper investigation of Sombath's disappearance. ASEAN and other governments must not enable and embolden the Lao government to further suppress and intimidate domestic and regional civil society. While it is inspiring to know that many governments have expressed concern in public and at various international fora, including through the UPR process, I think it's time to match words with action. Government engagement and aid must be conditioned on Laos meeting its international obligations, especially concerning the investigation of Sombath Somphone's disappearance. The governments who spoke about this in public, including at the UPR process, should not be throwing aid funds at Laos. Unconditional engagement is emboldening the Lao government to continue this tradition of saying one thing and doing another, much to the detriment of development in Laos and development in this region. It is emboldening Laos to say one thing in public, but in reality telling us that no one is safe. Simply put, I'm calling on these governments who talked about Sombath's disappearance to put their money where their mouth is. It is time to match words with action. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. We now have time for questions, if there are any. There is a microphone at the top of the steps there. Precedence will be given to members from the media, but anybody's welcome to ask questions. Just please identify yourself, your name and affiliation, and keep your questions short. Thank you. Maybe in the meantime you're thinking of a question, and then I can ask one.
Sorry, I didn't answer your question.
Exactly, that's what I was coming to. But I think the more general question could be what's next, and I think it's a question that probably all four panelists could attempt to answer, and probably we can start from Debbie, since exactly the question went unanswered. And what are the next steps in terms of the ASEAN People's Forum and the likelihood of that happening in Laos?
I'm not going to use a crystal ball to predict what will happen, but I can say very clearly that at the sidelines of the ASEAN People's Forum in Kuala Lumpur in April this year, there was a very heated meeting during which the representatives essentially representing Laos interests, the Lao government interests, and representatives representing independent Laos civil society, as well as ASEAN civil society representatives, sat down and had a talk about whether we should actually allow, or we should proceed with the ASEAN People's Forum 2016 being held in Vientiane. Now, if we did actually proceed with trying to organize this conference, we have to be willing to throw away any reference to Sombath, dams, LGBT, indigenous people, and multi-party democracy. So it will actually be more of a group meditation rather than a conference, because there are very few things that we will have left to talk about. It would also be a submission and a surrender to the Lao agenda, the Lao government agenda, which would actually make some ASEAN governments very happy, because they wish that we would not talk about LGBT, multi-party democracy, indigenous people's rights, dams, and enforced disappearance. So I think there is a process now going on that the delegation nominated by the APF to go to Laos, to Vientiane, and actually talk face-to-face with the Lao government to find out whether they are that serious, whether they are intent on sticking with these conditions, because it looks very unlikely. If the Lao authorities insist on that, then we're going to have a very big problem with holding the APF in Laos, especially when our traditional partners don't seem to be willing to surface as well, or to come up and openly work with us. So that's a big problem. The other problem too is the fact that in 2012, there was the Asia-Europe People's Forum held in Vientiane. It was heralded as a breakthrough event. This is groundbreaking. We're actually bringing Asian and European civil society together with Laos civil society. It was going to be the blossoming of civil society in Laos. It was going to be the turning point in the opening up of Laos, so that it can be more easily integrated politically, culturally, and so on into the Asia-Europe alliance and cooperation. What happened as a result? Sombath disappeared. Things went worse for civil society. Those groups that were there, those people that were there, who temporarily threw off their fear, who were encouraged by this event to speak up and to work with regional groups and international groups, have gone into hiding. Some of them have trimmed back or stopped doing the work that they were doing. Can we actually afford to hammer Laos further by having an ASEAN People's Forum that will be comprised mostly of gongos, of government organized NGOs or government agents pretending to be civil society? We would be endangering those remaining members of civil society who have been doing their work. This is a very big dilemma. Can we afford to have more disappearances in Laos for those brave people who dare to turn up for the ASEAN People's Forum? In fact, in one interaction we were told we should not, regional activists don't need to be worried that whether they are safe or not. If you are good people, you will be safe. So what is the definition of good people in the eyes of the Laotian authorities? We are told you can't go and talk about Sombath. Don't say his name when you go to Vientiane. Are you joking? Is that what we're supposed to do? Are we actually wanting to become temporary prisoners of the Laotian authorities? Because essentially, if you go to Vientiane and you can't talk about Sombath, you can't talk about LGBT, you can't talk about dams, you can't talk about indigenous people, you can't talk about multi-party democracy, we are submitting ourselves. We are making ourselves temporary prisoners every time we visit to Vientiane. That is actually the dilemma of regional civil society at this time. It's also been very frustrating because the APF has been seeking a meeting with the Laotian authorities for quite some time now, since April. We've been told the latest is that there's been an appointment made for October the 1st. And we are concerned that this is another delaying tactic to make people put off their decision, the final decision, on whether we're actually having an ASEAN People's Forum in Laos next year. I wonder too whether Laos is going to tell all those governments who are coming to the ASEAN Summit and to ASEAN meetings, no Sombath, no dams, no LGBT, no multi-party democracy, no indigenous people. I'm sure more no's will be added. And then we're just going to have meditative ASEAN summits.
Thank you, Deb. Anyone else, Kingsley, Shui Meng, want to add anything about potential avenues that may be explored, pursued in terms of next steps, what to do or what other actors should do?
Unfortunately, there is no superior body with powers of intervention in international human rights law, such that a state or some agency can directly intervene in Laos and force it to comply with its international obligations. The one exception being if an enforced disappearance meets the definition of an international crime within the Rome Statute, that it is a part of a widespread or systematic attack against a civilian population, in which case then there is power for someone to be brought before the international court. But for human rights generally, no. And so we are left in the position where we must make sure that this case is not forgotten. So in terms of next steps, we will continue to ensure the case is risen here in Thailand, in Laos, regionally, and at all other international fora as well, such as the Human Rights Council, which we saw this year. Because there is much less of an incentive to resolve issues that have been forgotten. And we hope that by continuing to remind Laos of its international obligations and continuing to remind other states that work with Laos of Laos' international obligations, ultimately, over time, Laos will have no choice but to comply with them.
Shui Meng, did you want to add anything?
It's difficult. I am just an ordinary person. I have no power. I have no links. I can only continue to do what I've been doing and hope that the Lao authorities would see the resolution of Sombath's disappearance and opening up on cases of other disappeared in Laos would actually
do itself good and do the country good. But this is a wish. I think that for many, many years, Laos has isolated itself and has not been engaged very actively in the region, politically, socially, and economically. And it is only in the last 10 years that Laos have become more willing and more enthusiastic about engaging itself with regional partners and also with international partners, especially in the field of commerce, in the field of trade, in the field of economic development. But I think, and this is again a hope, that there will be newer and younger leaders that come up through the ranks of the Lao polity, will see that very conservative, old-style politics may work to its own detriment. Laos will be chairing the ASEAN in 2016. I'm sure, even though in the ASEAN context there is an unspoken principle of non-interference, that behind the scene there will be countries who would be continuing to push for the issue of Sombath and other human rights violations. Because many people have spoken about Sombath's disappearance, have also pointed out that Sombath is not only a Laos citizen. Sombath won the 2005 Magsaysay Award. He should be regarded as a citizen also of ASEAN. What happens to one person or many persons in one ASEAN country actually have implications on the reputation of other ASEAN countries also. And this is also in the context that ASEAN wants to build an ASEAN economic community, for which it had also referred to priorities of building a more people-centered community. Now, how true that will be, or how effective that will be, or how sincere that will be, is something that we need to watch. But I'm sure many, many people within the ASEAN countries, throughout the 10 ASEAN countries, they have aspirations. Singapore is holding its election today. And I assume that, some journalists have gone to cover the elections. Singapore is changing. Other countries are changing. I'm sure that Laos will change too. Let's hope that the pace of change will not be a snail pace one. Let's hope that for me personally, for my family, that I will see the resolution of this case. I will do whatever I can, as I stated, but my hands are tied. There are very few doors open to me in Laos. The legal system is difficult to even comprehend in Laos.